Dear viewers, and welcome to a new edition of our program Africa Today. In today's edition, we are going to tackle the preparations ahead of the climate conference, which will be taking place in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. And first, we'll start with this report where the first ship carrying grain from Ukraine for people in hungriest parts of the world has docked at Djibouti on the Horn of Africa, as areas of the East Africa are badly affected by the deadly drought and conflict. Food security experts say it is a drop in the bucket for the vast needs in the worst hit countries of Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, the country to which the shipment is going. Let's watch more in this story.
The United Nations said that a ship carrying wheat from Ukraine to the drought-stricken Horn of Africa docked on Tuesday, the first to make the journey since the Russian-Ukrainian war 6 months ago. The vessel Brave Commander is carrying 23,000 tons of grain and will soon be followed by another carrying 7,000 tons. The total shipment to be unloaded in Djibouti and transported to Ethiopia is enough to feed 1.5 million people for a month. That barely begins to alleviate the problems of Eastern Africa, where the World Food Programme says extreme weather, surging food prices and conflict mean 82 million people need food aid across 9 countries in East Africa. Officials hope their successful voyage will inspire private companies to begin shipping grain from Ukraine to Eastern Africa. Russia and Ukraine usually supply 90% of wheat imported in East Africa. The Russia-Ukraine conflict sent fertilizer and food prices soaring as Russia blockaded Ukrainian ports. Energy prices have also surged following Western sanctions on Russia, a major energy exporter, imposed over the invasion of its neighbor.
In a climate speech in the Climate Week, and in his speech at the opening session of the African Climate Week 2022 ACW in Gabon's Libreville on Monday, Egypt's foreign minister and president-designate of the 27th Climate Change Conference, COP27, Sameh Shoukry, emphasized the need for equitable climate change action, encouraging African voices to lead the call. Let's watch more in the following story.
Climate Week in Gabon, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said that Africa is one of the most places that suffers from the impact of climate change, especially with the population density several parts of the continent. Shoukry said the world is facing escalating challenges over geopolitical changes, energy crises, food security, as well as climate change. He added that developing nations in Africa need to deal with all these repercussions on top of internal difficulties such as the challenges of development. He noted that Egypt understands these challenges and continues to deal with them and to evaluate the progress of previous vows. The foreign minister also said that Africa is committed to spending 2 to 3% of its suffering economy each year to counter climate change. Meanwhile, Africa's share of greenhouse gas emissions is only 4%. He called on all African communities, governments, youth, women, the civil society, and the African private sector to press for climate justice to counter the changes. Shoukry thanked Gabon for hosting the Africa Climate Week, saying it is a vital platform to deal with the African needs and challenges against the phenomenon.
To shed more light on the issue, we are very much delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Jailan Sharaf, former Dean of Mass Media and Information Technology Faculty. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Jailan.
Good afternoon to you and to all your audience.
Dr. Jailan, Foreign Minister Shoukry called for climate justice in the African continent, encouraging the African countries to lead the call for equitable climate justice. What are your thoughts on Shoukry's remarks?
As you mentioned, Foreign Minister Shoukry was attending the Africa Climate Week 2022.
Yeah.
During his speech, he was referring to that Africa, in spite that Africa's is very low in contribution to greenhouse gas emission, it remains the most, unfortunately, the most vulnerable continent and remains requiring to spend huge financial resources to adapt to climate change impacts, because as you know that we are the most continent impacted by this in different resources, in energy, in water, in even agriculture. So we encourage the African voices, including civil society, youth, women, farmers, workers, academia, even the academics in different areas, the private sector, to call for equitable climate action. Also at this Africa Climate Week, he presented an official invitation from President Fattah al-Sisi to Ambad Ondemara, the President of Gabon, to participate in the World Leaders Summit that will take place on the 7th and 8th November at Sharm el-Sheikh during COP27. As you know, this is very important that Africa to be attending. As you know, that we are going to be the voice of Africa in this very important summit that will take in place coming 2 months.
Yes. 2 months. Yes. Dr. Sharaf, the foreign minister elaborated during his speech that Africa is actually obliged to spend 2 to 3% of its current financial means to mitigate the effects of the climate change. What would be the fair deal at the upcoming climate gathering to help the African nation to adapt to the climate change?
You know that, as we mentioned, this is a very important issue that we should adapt with it. So Shokri mentioned during his visit at ACW that all Africa governments should continue to advocate for climate justice, pointing out that the world is facing accelerating changes to geopolitical changes, energy crisis, food security, also increasing the cost of financing, as well as the direct change due to climate change. So the developing countries in Africa have to deal with all these repercussions while facing their own internal difficulties and development changes. We all the Africans have the right to develop themselves, so we are now facing challenges. Also, he stressed that it's very important that the COP27, which will be coming, as we mentioned, on November, next November, it's a very important platform to deal with African challenges and needs in order to face the climate change.
Yeah. How has the climate change negatively affected the African continent, the greatest bearer actually of the impact of these climate changes which did happen, and how has the climate changes impact been evident on the African states this year, Dr. Sharaf?
You know that we already are facing that, and we are discussing the climate change since the 90s and until the UN taking an action 2015. So there was main longer-term impacts of climate change in Africa, including changing rainfall patterns, which affect the agriculture. Also, this affects the food security because we are facing reduction in food security, worsening water security also, that we don't have enough resources for water, and this will lead to desertification. So this is very, very important to point that. Also, if we are going to have lack of water, this means that we are going to have decreasing fish resources in the large lakes due to rising temperatures and overfishing. Also, the rising sea levels, according to global warming, will affect the coastal areas. So Africa, that's why we are saying and admitting and mentioning every now and then that Africa is the most vulnerable continent to climate change because it is exposed to damaging climate risks, including extreme droughts, flooding, and storms, and so on.
Indeed. How are the African countries, Dr. Sharaf, are supposed to adhere to their impact pledges amid the tons of economic hardships that they are facing and the aftermath of the pandemic that is already taking its toll on every aspect of life in Africa?
Although I'm not an economist, but I refer to a very important report. This is a report calling African Economic Outlook. This is this year, 2022. It mentions very important things, that the continent's addition financing are estimated at $432 billion. And the continent loses between 5% and 15% of gross domestic product to climate change. Africa already received between 2016 and 2019 money as a donation was about $18.3 billion. That means that between 2020 to 2030, we have a gap in climate finance, which is approximately $1,288 billion. So we are facing a disaster.
Yes.
So that means to face climate change, we should have effective planning to avoid forest degradation, developing renewable energy, and limiting the expansion of coal-fired power plants.
Indeed.
So this is a very important issue we should discuss among the economists in order to see what we are going to do in order to face this disaster.
Yes. Actually, the experts have always raised their concern about how the climate change is affecting the food security and what kind of global action must be taken actually to limit the effects of the climate change on the issue of the food security in particular, Dr. Sharaf.
The experts have already put 4 dimensions for food security according to climate change. These 4 dimensions are food availability, 2, food accessibility, number 3, which is food utilization, and finally, food system stability. It will have an impact, of course, on human health, livelihood, assets, food production, and also distribution channels, as well as changing the purchasing power and market flow. As you know now, according to the disasters that we are facing of the crisis of pandemic COVID, and also the problem between Russia and Ukraine, we are now facing different problems according to the market and the flow of food and so on. So now we are going to change our way of purchasing. We are going to have another. So they are looking for how to manage genetics resources, livestock, to start to have a hatchery for fisheries and agriculture systems, investing in resilient agriculture development, and finally, enhance markets and trade contribution to stability of food security. So there are many plans, and I think all the leaders all over the world are know well that we are facing a disaster, and they should put plans very quickly. Plans, as the climate change problem is accelerating very, very quickly, as we already.
Finally, Dr. Alam, what are your expectations for the outcome of this gathering in terms of the carbon emission and the money pledges, which is main concern here?
I think that we are going to have a set of resolutions and solutions for all the climate change problems. They should, all the developed countries should help the African continent by donating them the money that they can already know how to face this problem, the climate change, because this will lead to, as we said, it will have impact on human health, on that people will, there will be displacement of human population and so on. So this, I think, COP27, we will have great solutions for Africa, especially African continent, and for other countries. And I think this will would be investing. The green economy will be more effective because this is now the booming way in the economy in order to avoid or to face the challenge of the climate change and how to adapt with it.
Indeed. Dr. Jailan Sharaf, former Dean of Mass Media and Information Technology Faculty. Always a pleasure to listen to your precious input, Dr. Sharaf. Thank you very much for being our guest for today. And our dear viewers, we wrap up this episode of Africa Today with this feature story coming to us from the staying in the African continent, and the story which we'll be watching here before we wrap up our episode. Let's watch this feature story.
An NGO conducts many eye test camps in hard-to-reach areas around Uganda. The free services cater to those who ordinarily wouldn't afford to see an ophthalmologist, yet vision problems are common in the country. And with a cross-subsidization model, those who are diagnosed with refractive errors get eyewear they manufacture at affordable prices. At the workshop in Kampala, the eye clinic is always open since the needs are huge. When a team of innovators started the company in 2016, they wanted to create accessibility to eyewear for marginalized communities and to design eyewear fitting African facial features. Using recycled plastic, it is the first company in East Africa to design and manufacture eyewear. They also use other locally available materials like cow horns, bamboo, and offcuts from clothes like jeans. The team has now embarked on a designer line of frames for those who can afford them as it scales into other African countries.
With that, our dear viewers, we come to the end of this edition of our program Africa Today. Till tomorrow is another crew. It's goodbye. Many thanks for watching.